Hey everybody, Ryan here at etrailer. Today we're going to be checking out the line of PTC custom fit synthetic oil filters. With this being a custom fit part, you're going to make sure you get the right one for your particular vehicle. So be sure to use our fit guide and enter in your vehicle's information. That way you get set up with the right filter. When it comes to maintaining your own vehicle, oil changes are arguably the most important thing. If you're going to neglect a couple maintenance items, definitely don't neglect your oil. That's kind of the blood, if you will, to your vehicle's engine, and that's what's going to help keep it running for a lot of miles. Especially, with a lot of more modern cars today, all the tolerances and the machining that goes into putting that engine together is so good that you can really stretch those oil change intervals out. Some manufacturers go up to 10,000 plus miles, believe it or not. And so, especially if you plan on running at those longer intervals, you want to make sure to not only use a quality oil, but a quality filter as well. This one is going to be designed to work with synthetic oils, specifically designed to work with those. And, honestly, that's kind of what a lot of manufacturers are recommending nowadays anyway, because, to stretch out 7, 8, 10,000 miles, you're going to want a good oil and a good filter. With that said, though, this one is rated to provide filtration for up to 10,000 miles. With that said, though, check your vehicle's owner's manual. Just because this is rated for 10,000 miles, if your manufacturer recommends you change it every 5,000 miles, then follow those guidelines, and that'll give you the best performance. As far as the quality of the filter goes, there's not a ton to talk about here, really. It's an oil filter, but, we're going to cover as much as we can here. As far as the quality of the filter goes, it feels pretty good. It's a solid case. I'm trying to squeeze it. It's not flexing at all. It doesn't feel really any worse or better than a lot of other filters that I've used in the past. From the stock OEM type ones to other brand ones, all the way up. I've even used some of the more performance-oriented filters that are a little higher end and, a few more bucks, and it doesn't feel any poorly constructed or better constructed of those. So I'd say it's right on par with a lot of the other ones. It's going to give you that gasket. Obviously, that's important. You want to keep the fluid in your engine, right? I will say, though, when you change oil, make sure, so when you unscrew your old filter, make sure that gasket off the old filter comes off. Sometimes they like to stick to the engine block, and then if you don't notice that and you thread the new one on, it's called double gasketing, it's going to leak. So just kind of a tech tip, pay attention to that when you do that. And what I like to do too is just kind of get my finger wet with a little oil, when I pull the other one off. I just kind of put a little bit around the O-ring here, the seal, and that way it just kind of, just has a little lubrication. You have to do it. Everyone's got their own way, but that's what I like to do. With that said, it's pretty decent. It's hard to say how good it's actually going to work unless we, really put some miles on it, cut it open, inspect it, maybe send it out. But I don't feel, I don't see any reason to believe that it won't do a good job. As a matter of fact, I'm actually putting this on my own personal vehicle today. So I've got confidence in it. I think it ought to do a pretty good job. One of the big things for me that I wanted to make sure of is that this new one had what's called an anti-drainback valve in it, okay? That's really important to me, and this one does, all right? And what that means is whenever you turn your engine off, it's going to prevent the oil from, freely flowing back into the filter, and it's going to keep that oil up inside of the engine. And the reason for that is it's going to make it a little bit easier on your motor when you do cold starts, right? So you're done driving, park it for the night. Next morning, it's going to do a little bit better job of keeping oil where it needs to be inside the engine and not cause so much wear and tear upon that initial startup, because honestly, that's where a lot of the engine wear and tear is originated from, is on those initial startups and things like that, because with the oil all down into the pan and not running through the engine, you have just that split second of metal contact. And so having an anti-drain back valve in here is just a little extra insurance that it'll help prevent that additional wear or cause any issues as far as that goes. So I just wanted to compare the synthetic one to the other line that we offer. This is also a PTC oil filter. This one works with conventional and synthetic oils. So if you might have an older vehicle, you just run cheap oil through just to kind of keep it going, this might be a better option for you. I've used these in the past, quite a few times actually, never had any issues. This will be my first time using this one, and I'm switching out because I actually recently just purchased a new vehicle, a lot nicer vehicle. They suggest using synthetic oil, full synthetic, and that's what I'm doing, and so that's why I'm opting with this. With that said, this one will work with conventional and synthetic oils, but my thought is, you have one specifically designed for synthetic. Why not use it, right? They got that in mind. I feel like the filtration would probably be better. Having a full synthetic, it's got more lubricity, and so my thought is this one can probably filter out the particles a little bit better than this one. This one still work? Absolutely, but like I said, my thought is you have one specifically designed, why not use that one, right? So curious to see how this one will work out. But with that said, why don't we go ahead, get underneath our vehicle, and just kind of do an oil change together. If you want to kind of check it out, see how it fits, see how it compares. Actually, the current one that I have on my vehicle is actually an OEM type one, so I think it'll be cool to pull that one off and kind of do a side-by-side here and see how they look and kind of just get a feel for them. So since I want to pull off the original filter and just to kind of compare it to the new PTC one, I figured why not just show the oil change as well. So if you're curious on how to do this or want a little bit of advice, feel free to follow along. If not, you can skip ahead a little bit and check out that comparison. I'm working on, this is a Cadillac Escalade today. Every vehicle is going to be kind of the same in terms of the process to do. And everyone has their own way of doing it. This is mine. What I like to do is get the engine warm. I mean, not full temp or blazing hot or anything, just warm it up a little bit. That helps that oil kind of flow a little bit more. And then what I like to do is pop the hood and take off the oil cap. Set it somewhere where you're not going to lose it. Forget about it. And what that's going to do is just help kind of vent everything and help that oil drain a little bit faster. So underneath of our vehicle here, we're not going to worry about the filter just yet. We want to drain all the engine oil out first. So you want to locate the drain plug. In our case, mine's right here. You really want to be sure that you're taking the engine oil out. So find your engine oil pan. The drain plug's usually going to be somewhere on it. In our case, I have a 15 millimeter head bolt. That's what I'm going to pull out. And I suggest kind of having everything set up here. So I have my oil catch, my used oil catch pan here, and my tools ready. If you need one of these catch pans, we actually sell quite a few of them here at etrailer. And we also sell tools as well, so regular tools. We have some oil filter wrenches and things of that nature too, so check that out if that's something you need. But with that said, we'll go ahead and get our bolt out here and get all the oil draining. I like to, when I'm unthreading this, I like to actually kind of apply a little bit of pressure on it, forward pressure, and you can kind of feel when the threads stop. I have to do one quick motion here, and I don't try to make a big mess. So we got it draining out. We'll give that a few minutes. Let all that oil get out, and then we can come back to it. So once the oil drains out and you kind of get down to real slow drip, that's usually sufficient. You can sit here all day and it'll keep dripping like that, honestly. Or what some people like to do as well is go ahead, leave this keep dripping, change the filter, screw that back on, and then put the bolt in. For today's demonstration, we're just going to go ahead and put our bolt back in. I like to, while it's draining, just examine your seal or the O-ring around the bolt if you have one, and just check everything, clean up the threads. Just, take a good look at everything, see what's going on. Sometimes there will be a magnet on the end of the bolt. You can examine that for any metal shavings and kind of just get an idea of what's going on inside of your engine. But I'm going to kind of just wipe that clean. And what I like to do as well is use paper towels. So if you use rags, I know chances are good nothing's going to happen, but if you were to get a particle or something, a piece of the rag on the bolt and get inside of your motor, it's not great. With these paper towels, they're going to disintegrate pretty much immediately. So, it's your call. But we'll go ahead and get that threaded back in. Get it done by hand. And I'll get this out of the way here so we got some room to work. And then tighten it back down. I'm sure the manufacturer has a torque specification. What I like to do is just snug it up and give it a little extra. I mean, you don't have to crank down on these things by any means. Get them snug, bump it a little bit more, and that'll be sufficient. But with that done now, we can go ahead and move on to getting our filter off. To get your oil filter off, you got a few different ways you can do it. You might be able to get lucky and do it by hand. We actually sell some tools here to do it. We have these type of wrenches. I'm really not too crazy about them. You kind of just fight them. I like the claw type ones, where you put it on a ratchet and it claws, and those work really well. In our case, on ours, everything's just so tight. But if you were to buy one, I'd recommend getting the claw. Those are really neat. Work a lot of times. Or you can just do things old-fashioned. I just got a big pair of pliers here. You really don't have to worry too much because we're going to be replacing this filter. And so I'll break it loose like that. All right. And now that I have it loose, I'm going to go ahead and get my pan set up here so we don't get oil all over us. And just like the bolt, I like to kind of spin it, let that oil come on out. As long as we get it completely removed. Quickly let it come down, and just like the bolt, we'll give this a couple minutes to drain and get all that old oil out of the motor. So once it's all drained out, what I like to do is just kind of clean everything up. Then usually you'll have a little bit of residual oil there, and like I talked about before, I just like to put some around that O-ring just to give it a little lubrication. And now we'll just thread this on, and so make sure you're going on straight. Not cross-threading it. It should go on pretty easy. And with these, you're just going to tighten down my hand. So, mine's just kind of hard to grab. You just don't have a ton of working room here. But, usually once it's snug, if you get another 3/4 of a turn on it, it'll turn. It's usually pretty good. So I get it as tight as I can there. Kind of clean it off, and then that way, whenever we put new oil in the motor and start everything up and check it, we can just take a quick peek under here and make sure it's still dry and clean. That way, we verify it's not leaking. So back up top, we can fill the motor up for the oil now. So, check your manufacturer's recommendation in terms of, what weight oil to use, how much of it, and so on. What I like to do is get it pretty close. So this motor calls for 6 quarts. I'm going to put 5.5 in, something like that. Start up the truck, let it run for a second. Shut it off, kind of give it a minute, let that oil drain back down. The reason for doing that is that way the filter fills up. And then I'll recheck it and then top it off as needed. So let's go ahead and get that done. So once we get pretty close, which I think that ought to do it, we'll go ahead and start up the truck, give it a second to run. Look underneath, make sure we're not leaking or anything like that. Let the oil settle again. Check it, and if we need to add a little bit more, not a big deal. We can add it to the fill mark. If we're right on, we're all good to go. So we don't need to let it run for a crazy amount of time or anything like that. I usually just give it a good 10, 15 seconds, let that oil kind of flow through the motor and fill up that filter, and that ought to be sufficient. So I'll go ahead, shut it down, and get the rest of the job done. Whenever you're ready to check your oil, what I like to do is pull the dipstick, wipe it clean. That way we kind of get a, kind of reset it, I guess, if you will. And make sure you're sufficient. And just like we talked about, so I'm actually in pretty good shape. I might put another small splash in, about halfway up. If you're happy with it, it's at the proper level, you're good to go. It's really all there is to it. If not, add it accordingly. So like I promised, I just wanted to compare, just give you something here. So here's the filter that I pulled off. This is an AC Delco one. And honestly, very similar in terms of how they look and feel. If these were the same color and the labels were removed, I'd have a really hard time telling you which one's which. So that's good, at least in my opinion, in terms of the construction quality and things of that nature. If you're curious about cross-referencing your filter, there should be a description at the bottom of the page with several filters. I believe there's Filiam, AC Delco, Motorcraft, kind of some of the more popular ones. So, that's there for you if you need it. But, other than that, a nice piece. And with all that said, that'll finish up our look at of the line of PTC synthetic custom fit oil filters.